Okay, everyone. Hey, how's it going today? So, we are going to continue on our world history journey, as I normally say, and now we're going to get a little bit into ancient China. China is, of course, really, really, really old. It is quite remarkable that we have found settlements that go back as maybe 400,000 years. Very small hunter gatherer ish, maybe villages with limited agriculture, but there were definitely people in the region. Okay, and as you see, one of our ancient flags of China with the dragon here. But this is a culture that is tremendously old, and that we're still learning more and more about it every single year. Now, the key thing here is rice. Now, I already talked a lot about wheat, but rice was a tremendous change. This is an incredible terraced rice farm. If you see here, I mean, it's amazing where they can grow rice and how good they've gotten at growing rice. But rice is huge. I can't understate this enough. This steady food supply. However, the interesting thing here is, and still today, much of China is rural, that most people are farmers. It is not easy to grow rice. You have to do a lot of work to grow rice. But as we will talk about in the future, rice is a crop that you can get 2, 3, if not maybe 4 crops a year. So when you have that tremendous amount of food, it really gives people options to do lots of different things. So with the domestication of rice and the widespread use of rice, China is really going to become stable. So in many ways, without rice, it might have taken China a lot longer. So, and once again, just like I said in the Middle East, I don't know how much we domesticated rice or rice domesticated us. Now, undoubtedly, just like everywhere else, you've got rivers are where we're going to live here. And as you can see here, you have the Yellow River, or also known as the Huanghui River, or down here, if you follow the mouse, the Yangtze River. And then you have the Huai River and the Zhejiang down here. These rivers are crucial. They are very large rivers. You can get lots of water from these rivers. Also, we'll see in China, the river transport and the use of canals in the future is going to be absolutely crucial. Without these rivers, we don't have these ancient civilizations, and everything just kind of falls apart. But these rivers are dangerous. Here's a picture of the Yellow River flooding. The two worst disasters or natural disasters in human history are both river floods in China. The 1931 Central China River flood, in which 3.7 million people were killed, and then in 1897, when just the Yellow River flooded, 2 million people were killed. This is a much more difficult living, whereas these rivers bring great silt and they bring lots of water. They also bring destruction. And that's why we see ancient China, most of their engineering feats are going to be dealing with these floods. The first settlements that go about to, I want to say, anywhere from 2000 to 5000 BCE would be the Longshan culture. If you see all those little dots right there, these are ancient sites that we've been able to find. There were walled cities, so you know what that means. There was definitely some fighting. But you can start to see kind of, I don't want to call it a city-state type pattern, but we definitely have these independent kind of interconnected cities that develop over time. But what you really need to know and understand here is the dynasty system. Dynasties are going to be really important, and it's an easy way for us to keep track of Chinese history. On the right there, you see a depiction of a Chinese emperor. The whole idea of a dynasty, and we talked about this in Egypt, is that you have a series of rulers from one family. And it was very important for the emperor to always have many, many heirs. So these emperors would have multiple wives and unfortunately concubines that they would keep. And eventually they would always have lots and lots of sons. It was very rare for a dynasty to die out. Actually, in Egypt, with some of the intermarriage and things along that line, having a dynasty die out or a dynasty with no heir was fairly uncommon. In China, that never really happens. There's always lots of heirs. The problem is, though, the dynasty can become weak and corrupt, and you can get a stronger family that wants to take you over. And so really the entire history of China, we can break it down by dynasty. And the dynasty system, depending on who you start, or who you ask, started anywhere from about 5,000 years ago to somewhere around 4,000 years ago and went all the way up to 1911. So this is a tremendously long time, and that's why China really, you know what time period you're in China by discussing the dynasties. Now, the supposed first dynasty was the Jia. Even though it's spelled a little differently, we pronounce it with the Jia. And all of the records that we have about the Jia, they are just awesome. That it is pure awesomeness. As you can see here with the mouse on the right, it wasn't a tremendously large area. That's kind of the center and maybe a little bit bigger. But these guys are credited with doing the first flood control projects under you, the engineer. It's just kind of cool that we have an engineer that evidently is the king. You don't normally see that. It's the great or the rotund or some other crazy title. No, we have an engineer. So they were able to divert rivers. They were able to prevent the floods from destroying everything, especially because they're on the Yellow River there. We see the development of bronze at this time. Supposedly, we have found some palaces, maybe some writing, but we're not sure. This is really just incredible with the sources that we have that the Chinese write about this incredible group. And again, you, the engineer, but unfortunately, blank slide. Yep, it's probably fake. I apologize for getting you excited about the Jia Dynasty, but there really isn't any evidence that they existed. We see that these projects were done. We see flood control projects. We see ancient cities with walls and stuff like that. But there really isn't hardcore evidence that they existed. So, sorry. However, the totally real dynasty that we absolutely know existed, and the first one that you really want to call it, are the Shang. And the Shang existed from 1750 to 1050. And as you can see on the map, quite a large area for, 3,700 years ago. Pretty impressive. And the fact that it was a dynasty that lasted for 700 years. We look at the United States, we're a little over 200 years old, and that's a pretty good run, but we'd still have 500 years just to get to the first Chinese dynasty. And then if we go all the way back, though, Egypt, by 1750, is already into the Middle Kingdom at that point. They've been rolling for 1,000 years when China just got started, so that gives you an idea how old Egypt was again. But the Shang really were pretty impressive. Now, we absolutely know they had the bronze, and they were really able to control everybody through the use of bronze, and that was really smart. The idea, if you have metal, you need to control metal, so you can use your metal for weapons and nobody else has it. We know that they domesticated the horse, and we think they domesticated the horse because of interactions with people in the Tarim Basin, which is way out into the western edge of China. So they develop horses and chariots, and most importantly, writing. Now, on the right here, you see an oracle bone. I'll talk about those later. With early Chinese writing, we absolutely have pictograms, but something very interesting with Chinese writing, and we'll talk about the difficulty of it, is that they never develop an alphabet. Chinese writing was still pictogram based today. That's why you have thousands and thousands of characters versus, say, someone in our country just has to learn 26. We don't know why that didn't change, but for whatever reason, for them, it worked. But so we absolutely can attribute bronze to the Shang. We can attribute horses and chariots, which of course equals warfare, as well as the development of writing. We also see their government is pretty impressive as well. You have a king and an emperor at the top. They also are able to really use court functionaries and governors to rule different provinces. And they controlled everything through a network of walled towns, almost like they set up forts, if you will, all over China to control them. And in the end, that was able to allow them to maintain control for such a long time. And we know they had lots of wealth. On the picture on the right there is the tomb of a Shang emperor. And as you can see, the people right down here. Okay, this tomb was pretty impressive. It's not a pyramid, but hey, it's really not that far off. And they were buried with lots of jewels and weapons and pottery and stuff like that. So we know the Shang Empire had lots of wealth and they were very strong. They also developed the concept of taxes. Yes, taxes are very annoying, but they are incredibly important because you know what? When a government collects taxes, they're able to do stuff for you. If the government doesn't have to raise their own food, they can develop a military for your protection. They can foster trade. And in China's case, in the later dynasties, they will open up schools. So this taxation, which for the most part was just in like wheat or rice or something like that, are, really forms the basis of a federal government that actually provides for its citizens. Yes, they had an emperor, and if the emperor woke up, as we said before, and decided that Wednesday was now illegal, they could get rid of Wednesday. But this collection of taxes allowed for an involved government, and that's what the Shang did. Unfortunately, in the end, no empire can last forever, and around 1122, the Shang start to have problems, and in 1050 they are toppled by the Zhou. Yes, I know it looks like Zhao, but it's the Zhou. And the Zhou dynasty would last from around 1050 to 450 BCE. Really, the most important thing about the Zhou wasn't that they conquered the Shang, it was how they did it. This concept of the mandate in heaven, which I have here, is super crucial to understand, and I'll be telling you about it in just a moment. As you can see, the Shang maybe was right about here, so the Zhou actually getting larger. Now, the idea of the mandate of heaven is really important to get, is that it was a way that a family who was trying to take over a bad dynasty is able to rationalize what they did. And so basically, you see this so at the top in the middle here, where the mouse is, a new dynasty's born, the new emperor, everything's going well, he's going to make some changes, he's going to bring in education, and everything's going to be hunky dory. Excuse me, the empire is going to grow, everything seems super great, but then you have corruption, followed by famine. The commoners don't like it anymore, and what they realize is that they feel that the gods, by showing that the country has corrupt government, by sending natural disasters, is the way for the gods to say that the current dynasty does not have the mandate of heaven, or they are not really supposed to be the ruler anymore, and a new dynasty needs to take its place. And this happens on a number of occasions. Even the Mongols are able to take them over at one point using this concept. But this is really important. This is why early emperors have to work hard. They have to get things stable. But in the end, it is also a mechanism to allow people that see the problem with the government to perhaps make a change. Sometimes the change is great and sometimes it's not so great, but nonetheless, the mandate of heaven is crucial. You have to know this, you have to get this. In the end, this is how the Chinese dynasty system works, really from that 1050 when you get the first changeover all the way up to 1911. Unfortunately, with the dynasty that comes after the Shang, the Zhou, their emperors weren't super strong. So, what they ended up doing is setting up the first system of feudalism. The king is known as the son of heaven. And what the king would do is they would give land to the shi, the feudal shi. And the shi, his job was to collect taxes, and if the king or the son of heaven needs extra troops or money, that the shi will give it to them. Okay, the shi would encourage trade over their lands and into other lands. They would make sure the farmers, which is about 90% of the population, was growing food for everybody, and then it was their job to outfit the army to make sure that they were strong and ready to go. Now, when they initially put this in, it was okay, but in the end, feudalism is the worst government ever. What those feudal shi realized was that as long as they didn't mess with the Son of Heaven, everything was okay. But everybody likes more land, everybody likes more wealth. So what you end up happening is that shi attack other shi. And there ends up being lots of wars. Those wars between the shi stifle trade, farmers are pressed into service, so they're not growing enough crops, and then they're getting killed, so then there's no one to grow enough crops. And really, in the end, by around the year 450, the Zhou dynasty is really on the edge of collapsing when it's our nomads. Man, those nomads, they just keep coming, right? They keep taking stuff off. This is a picture below of the Xiongnu, which is actually an ethnic group that still lives today. Um, the fact of the matter is sometimes the nomads are going to be good because there will be some trade that the Chinese are able to do with them. But in the end, they're able to raid, they're able to attack. And when you already have that civil war going on, and now you've got these outside groups coming in, the Zhou dynasty completely just falls apart. So we don't really have a mandate of heaven type thing that's happening here. You have just complete and utter collapse because there was really no one strong enough because the feudal Shi were just fighting each other so much to take everything over. And China is going to descend into a period of about 250 years of complete and utter chaos. We're going to call it the period of warring states. And there's going to be lots of war, lots of death, and it's going to take about 250 years to fix it. But nonetheless, in ancient China, we have our establishment of culture, we have our establishment of the dynasty system, which will run for about 4,000 years, give or take a few. We have the development of metalworking, we have the development of military tactics, we've got the writing. So China is off and running, and it's going to be a fairly exciting ride. Okay, so make sure that you get your questions typed up for this, and I will see you guys in class.